Days after the floodwaters began to recede, the true magnitude of destruction came into sharp focus. Streets were clogged with debris, twisted metal, shattered furniture, and sodden belongings strewn like forgotten memories. The smell of damp earth and decay hung thick in the air, a constant reminder of the fury that had swept through Texas hill country. In neighborhoods once bustling with life, silence reigned. Families returned cautiously, stepping through muddy yards and collapsed fences, searching for anything salvageable. For some, there was nothing left but waterlogged walls and memories. The emotional toll was evident everywhere. Tears flowed freely as survivors recounted the moments they fled rising waters, the frantic calls to loved ones, and the helplessness of watching their homes vanish beneath the relentless flood. Stories of loss mingled with tales of resilience and solidarity, neighbors opening their doors, strangers lending hands, communities united in grief and hope. Emergency crews worked around the clock, clearing roads, restoring power, and rebuilding bridges, literally and figuratively. Volunteers from across the state poured in with supplies and support, determined to help the shattered communities rise again. Yet challenges remained daunting. Saturated ground made construction treacherous. Many displaced families faced uncertain futures, unsure if insurance or government aid would cover their losses. Mental health resources were stretched thin as the collective trauma began to settle. Amidst the ruins, however, sparks of strength emerged. Local leaders spoke passionately about rebuilding smarter and stronger, vowing to confront the growing threat of climate change and extreme weather that had turned once routine floods into catastrophic disasters. But even as hope flickered, residents knew the scars of the flood would last for years, and the looming question remained: when would the next storm strike? Weeks had passed since the floodwaters tore through Texas hill country, yet the battle was far from over. Beneath the surface of recovery efforts, a quieter war was unfolding, one of shattered livelihoods, broken spirits, and uncertain tomorrows. Homes that once stood proud were now gutted shells, stripped bare by water and mud. Many families faced the brutal reality of starting over from nothing, with insurance claims tangled in red tape and resources stretched thin. The economic toll rippled through small towns, shuttered businesses and lost jobs, adding layers to the crisis. But the flood's most insidious scars were less visible. Mental health counselors reported soaring cases of anxiety, depression and PTSD among survivors, nightmares haunted by rushing water, screams and loss. Children struggled to understand why their world had turned upside down. Parents fought to hold their families together amidst the chaos. Community centers became more than shelters. They transformed into lifelines, offering counseling, food, and a space for people to share their stories and begin to heal. Volunteers, local officials, and faith groups banded together, their empathy a beacon amid despair. The weather, however, remained an unpredictable foe. Meteorologists warned of an active hurricane season ahead and the looming threat of more severe storms fueled by climate change. For Texas, the flood was a harsh reminder of nature's growing fury, its power to destroy, but also to unite those brave enough to face it. In the face of devastation, the people of hill country held on to resilience and hope. Yet beneath that hope lay a quiet urgency, a plea for action, for preparedness, and for the world to listen before the next disaster strikes. As the waters finally settled, Texas hill country was left with more than just physical destruction. It was left with a stark message etched into every ruined home and flooded field. This flood wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning from nature itself about the escalating risks of extreme weather. Scientists pointed to the alarming pattern: heavier rains, faster rivers, and saturated soils primed for disaster. Climate change wasn't a distant threat anymore. It was here, reshaping the very landscape and forcing communities to confront a new reality. Local officials began to reevaluate everything: building codes, emergency response plans, and land use policies. Conversations once whispered in government offices now erupted into public forums and urgent debates. How do you protect a town when the ground beneath it refuses to absorb the rain? How do you evacuate when roads vanish underwater? How do you rebuild when the next storm could be just weeks away? For residents, the flood became a catalyst, a painful but necessary push toward preparedness. Flood insurance, emergency kits, evacuation routes, topics that once seemed distant suddenly became vital lifelines. But the challenge was immense. Texas is vast and varied, and many small towns lacked the resources to rebuild quickly or invest in costly infrastructure. Still, stories emerged of innovative solutions: flood warning apps, community drills, volunteer rescue teams trained in swift water response. The flood had exposed vulnerabilities, but it also ignited a fierce determination. It was a fight for survival, yes, but also a fight to adapt, to learn, and to face the future with eyes wide open.